Good infrastructure stays invisible to the end user. It's up to those of us who design, build, operate, and decommission it to see the big picture and build it responsibly. For the internet, that's us in this room. But seeing the big picture is hard. This thing is huge. Technically, the biggest thing we'll ever build. But I'll get to that in a minute. First, let's recap some stats. Globally, 55,000 Google searches per second. Something like 10 hours of new YouTube video uploaded every second. 2.5 million emails sent and received every second. Unbelievable. 90% of our information was made in the last 2 years. 2 years from now, that stat will still be the same. Or at least that's what I thought when I first drafted this a couple weeks ago, but that was before Pokemon Go. Seriously. In 2 weeks, Pokemon has more users than Twitter. Think about how much more information is created from an always-on session of augmented reality relative to 140 characters of text. It's maxing out the network. Your device on a 4G network. A 4G network can carry 50 megabits per second. 50 million bits per second. Imagine if we could see that with our naked eye. Let's drastically oversimplify. Picture a line connecting your device to the nearest wireless router or cell phone tower. Now, picture a tether for every device in this room, maybe 1,000 of them. Your connection, jumping to the next nearest link as you walk around the room, as you drive home, all around you, all day long. Not an email lost. What if we could see that link like we can see a power cord? After all, an electromagnetic signal is just as real as a copper cable. How differently would everyone see the world and what we've done to it? What's the biggest machine in the world? My high school physics teacher asked us that. We guessed around for a bit until he said it's the North American electric grid. All of that copper, interconnected from turbine to toaster oven, coordinated coast to coast. That's no longer it. Probably wasn't it at the time. Instead, it's our information machine, the internet, our species-wide central nervous system, sensing, transmitting, processing, and storing information, delivering data from Silicon Valley to Singapore in an instant, communicating, conducting commerce, and forever perfectly remembering that tweet, song, spam email, and Pokemon lure location. With ever more devices and sensors, we're always adding new nerve endings. One of those sensors, Voyager, the farthest we've ever sent one, is outside of our solar system. And just like any good nerve ending, it's sending information back towards the brain as long as it can. We've tethered it via one of those invisible cables, an ancient one, 20.2 billion miles long, anchored to the Earth via our deep space network of giant antennas. Its energy supply, a small nuclear generator, is an auxiliary system that allows it to carry out its primary information gathering mission. And here on Earth, it's the same thing. Our energy systems are auxiliary. Our utilities are small now relative to the information machine and subservient to it now. The internet is woven through them. The internet gives the utilities their instructions. Our mental model needs to completely flip to picture it properly. Those mammoth utilities with spinning turbines, transformers, and transmission lines are small and subservient. Can you picture it? They're all engaged as auxiliary systems in supporting their local installation of internet infrastructure. The utilities, electricity, water, gas, are fragmented. They are the peripherals. The internet is the whole. It will expand to envelop anything we build, no matter how large. It will extend as far as we ever send anything into space. The information machine is the biggest thing mankind will ever build. Think about that. The biggest thing we will ever build. Are we doing a good enough job? Because to me, big is terrifying. It makes me sick to my stomach with worry. Big means big quantities of natural resources to build and operate, unprecedented implications for climate change and our ecosystems, all depending on whether we get it right or wrong. As you know, the information machine currently consumes more electricity than all but 2 countries on Earth. The amount of energy and materials going into the machine, its carbon emissions, its water usage, it's immense. And our appetite for data grows 100% per year. All in the background. Most of the world doesn't see it. You probably saw the recent U.S. data center energy report from LBNL, Kumi, Massenet. There's some hope in there. In the U.S., data center electricity is holding relatively steady. But it's not that peaceful kind of steady. It's more like the steadiness at the center of a heated battle of tug of war. Up against us, trying to drive energy consumption up, augmented reality, billions of new sensors and devices coming online, the Internet of Things. And on our side, pulling with all the might they can muster, our friends Moore's Law, virtualization, and hyperscale cloud efficiency. Just one of those participants starts to falter. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like Moore's Law may be getting a leg cramp. And the stability is toast. You hold per unit energy constant, and a decade or 2 from now, the internet consumes more electricity than all that we produced globally last year. If that's not a rallying cry, I don't know what is. You hold per unit energy steady, and a couple of decades from now, the internet consumes more electricity than all that we produced globally last year. This is big. The National Highway System is another big thing we built. Maybe we can learn from that. Well, highways happen to lead to traffic, sprawl, and the loss of community. Our design locked us into a particular transportation system. Would we build our transportation system the same way if we could redo it? When our children look back on the information system we're building right now, what will they think of it? What will we have inadvertently locked them into with our current internet build-out? This is a puzzle, our biggest, coolest, most intricate one ever. And in order to solve it properly, we need to see the big picture. And we can't just be engineers. We need to also be sociologists and ecologists and philosophers as we innovate. And we need to innovate in coopetition. There are times when even competitors need to cooperate. This is one of those times. We are building it now. This is still the dawn of the creation of the biggest thing humankind will ever build, our magnum opus. We keep focused on building it to be beautiful, and it will be the greatest positive force humankind has ever unleashed. I'll tell you what it'll look like when we get it right. It'll be moral, lean, and liquid. Let me describe each of those three. Moral. Can a machine behave morally? Can a machine have values? Well, they already do. Picture a factory floor 100 years ago. The production equipment didn't have any means of reaction or decision. It wouldn't stop if a life were in danger or modify operation if pollution were getting problematic. It couldn't detect fire, let alone suppress it. Our early machines were built for unrelenting production. We didn't know better. They were brutal. We didn't build them that way on purpose. They just relied on models that were pure and simple, input and output, simple solutions to simple puzzles. Nothing outside of the machine mattered. That's changed. Today's internet-connected factories, filled with sensors and digital controls, detect problems imperceptible to humans and automatically react to protect life, the environment, and property. Now, does a factory floor that's designed to stop to protect your life have more morality than the one that prioritizes continuous production and nothing else? I think it does. We've created digital morals within our control and automation logic, and we've embedded that into our machines. They now have reflexes that mirror some of our values. They react how we would if we were in control. The internet is allowing us to make more and more of our machines ever more moral. And the data centers. Well, 20 to 30% of the servers in a data center are comatose. No information is coming or going, but the disks are spinning and the fans are on. If that were a factory machine thumping and churning away without any raw materials coming into it, nobody would stand for it. But it's invisible. You are the only ones who can see it. What if you got kicked off the plane because 20 to 30% of the seats had to fly empty? To me, there's something about being that wasteful that doesn't feel right. It doesn't align with my values. Data center inefficiency is the greatest irony of our time. After all, it's the data center's insights that keep those planes packed with passengers flying fuel-efficient routes. Data centers are streamlining and driving efficiency in almost every aspect of modern life, but not to themselves. Waste is the gap I notice, but there are an infinite number of ways to make the automated, behind-the-scenes control logic within our biggest creation reflect how we would react if we were in direct control of it. And it could start simply. In my example, couldn't a server send out a message if it thinks it's been forgotten? It's on us to codify our values. Who in here will start the open source community for control logic that reflects human values? The infrastructure will remain out of sight, but it can react how we would if we were watching with our hands on the controls. So when we get it right, it'll be moral. It'll also be lean. A carpenter cuts a board by hand and detects something, say a knot, and modifies saw speed and pressure, and the cut goes smoothly. Compare that to an early mechanized mill. That same board gets thrashed. But despite the waste, mechanization brought huge performance improvements, cost reductions, quality improvements. The lesson? You can create immense value and revolutionize industry despite waste. Sound familiar? Most of the world is still relying on software delivered like lumber from the early mill. Wasteful. Contrast that to a modern production line. A small defect is detected in the feedstock and the whole line stops to perform a root cause analysis. The goal, zero waste. Lean. That's where we as an industry still have to go. The internet is an information factory. It runs on energy. How efficient is it? Let's just say that getting fuel pumped, refined, converted to electricity, and delivered is 70% loss. 100 units of energy in the ground, 30 arrive at your data center door. PUE, say 1.5, so 1/3 waste. Of the 30 units of energy that arrive, 20 make it onto the IT equipment. How efficient from there? Well, you've got comatose servers, poor utilization rates, power supply losses, server fans, 50%. So of the 20 units of energy that get there, 10 units of energy move on. 100 units of energy at the start, down to 10 units of energy left. I'll let you do the math from here, but let me pose a few questions. How much of our IT activity is really required? One example, numerous copies of every piece of information ever created. Is it 4x more than we need? 8x? How much of our data has any value in it at all? The equivalent of a mill cutting through rotten wood? Is it 10% that doesn't really have any value? Or is it 10% that does? Finally, how efficient is software? Well, until a software developer gets information in his test environment about the amount of energy his new code consumes, it's impossible to tell how much room for improvement there is. We need to provide those feedback mechanisms so software developers can create green code. For me, we're at least 100x short of the ideal, maybe 1,000x. And that's even before we look at the CPU or the storage hardware itself. We have an equation that links energy and matter. E equals mc squared. We need the energy information equation. Easier said than done. But I know we need that theoretical limit. It would be like drawing a dashed line at the top of the chart, similar to Carnot efficiency for a thermal engine or Betz limit for a wind turbine. They define the theoretical ceiling. Let's draw that line and plot our current state up against it. I think when we see just how big of a gap there is, it'll propel us into the next wave of breakthrough innovation. And that tug of war, some new, as of yet unnamed entrant, will grasp the rope for our side. Who in this room will draw that line first, even with just an educated guess? To make the information factory lean, there are two places we need to make the invisible become visible. We need feedback for the software developers in their test environments about the amount of energy their new code consumes. And we need to draw that dotted line so we can see the gap between our current state today and the theoretical limit of energy information equation. Our biggest creation ever will be moral and lean. And it will also be liquid. What if a data center knew when the utility was under strain and reacted instantly, stopping some production and averting a city-wide power outage? In demand response, you'd call that load shifting. Move demand until later on. But better still, what if data center production wasn't stopped, but simply shifted to a neighboring grid that had excess capacity? After all, it's really just one machine. Geographic load shifting. We can design that behavior. I mean, we're about to start mining asteroids. This should be doable. It's possible today to move our demand for digital work at near the speed of light. It's a form of energy demand unlike any other we've ever seen in human history. Liquid. Currency brought liquidity to commerce. The internet brings liquidity to electricity. And it's not just bringing load to places of supply-demand mismatch. Move load to where electricity is more reliable, or systems more efficient, or follow the sun, an information machine whose production is in sync with our solar panels. Maybe we don't need as many grid-scale batteries for intermittency as we once thought. Or load fleeing the Northeast pre-Sandy, load fleeing political uncertainty, load flocking to failing economies where slowing activity means assets might sit idle, supporting those economies in their time of need. A beleaguered business owner with inactive servers sees an unexpected overseas paycheck for their use. It's only our human-made borders, the invisible, imaginary lines we've drawn on the ground, and the virtual walls we've built above them that can stop us. Where there is liquidity, there is arbitrage. Where there is arbitrage, there are huge gains for the innovators until the market becomes efficient. We are on the brink of the biggest arbitrage of energy, water, and emissions in history. With the right price signals and freedom to operate, market forces will wring out waste. And all that means huge gains for the innovators who can foster that liquidity and build the models to allow others to react and cooperate. Huge gains for those who can see this huge opportunity. Moral, lean, and liquid. So let's recap our to-do list. We've got codify morality, check. Add to Einstein's most famous equation, check. Wrangle the first liquid form of energy demand in human history, okay. So regroup in a couple weeks. I've got good news and bad news. The bad news, aside from the obvious about this being the hardest puzzle humans have ever come across, a lot of this innovation is going to go on behind the scenes, invisible to almost everybody, baked into our taken-for-granted infrastructure. The good news, those who really succeed, especially with that arbitrage part, stand the chance to become insanely wealthy and save the planet in the process. That might be noticed. The stakes have never been bigger. Planetary scale impacts aren't likely, they're absolutely certain. We are building it now. This is still the dawn of the creation of humankind's biggest machine ever, our magnum opus. This is the room. You are the creators, the philosopher engineers. You can build it to be ever more moral, lean, and liquid. You can solve this puzzle. You just need to see the big picture and all of the opportunity in front of you. Thank you.